Welcome into the College Football Overtime Podcast. My name is Garrett Chapman. His name is Abe Gordon. We got a lot to get into. It is the Week 4 preview show. Lots of ranked matchups coming up in this one, Abe Gordon. This is going to be a lot of fun. We'll get into all of it right here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. Several ranked versus ranked. A lot of other very important marquee matchups that are going to go a long way and potentially deciding the future of some conference championship outlooks, So lots of fun discussions to have. We'll do it right here. Thank you so much for joining us. So if you're here for the first time, thank you so much. If you're here for the second time and you're not subscribed, come on, man. Yeah, you know better than that. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow along because we got 2 of these coming out every single week. Lots of college football discussion right here on our podcast coming in to you wherever you get your podcast. I mean, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's right here on Twitter or YouTube, anywhere. Make sure to follow along all season long. But we got a lot to get into today. Before we jump into it, Abe Gordon, we got to welcome you in, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. We've got a sample size on some of these teams, but now it's kind of push comes to shove, and you referenced it. There are games this weekend that will impact and define conference races, and so really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun here. Let's go and start with one of those teams that I don't feel like a lot of people were expecting to really take off at this level. It's Illinois at Nebraska. And Abe, it's the first ever Friday night game at Memorial Stadium. And who would have thought this was going to be a ranked versus ranked matchup? Dylan Raiola is going to get his first really big opportunity to shine. He did against Colorado, if you include that instance. But as far as a ranked versus ranked in front of a national audience, this is a big opportunity for him.
Yeah, it's also a big deal for Nebraska that this is a home game. Their other two, as they currently stand, ranked opponents are Ohio State and USC. Both of those games are on the road. This is the only game that legitimately could stand between Nebraska and a 10-2 season. And if you're going 10-2 in the Big Ten, that's going to put you into discussion, whether you like it or not, for a college football playoff berth. And so this is a huge, huge game for Nebraska at home. And you talked about Dylan Raiola, his first chance to really kind of separate and stand out. I know we saw him a little bit against Colorado. We kind of knew what the deal was with Colorado, so we're not surprised that he performed relatively well. But this is a little bit of a different story. And for Nebraska overall, and for Matt Rule, having to do it against, and I would say no disrespect, but yeah, disrespect given, a coach that maybe puts a little bit of fear in you, into Brett Bielema. You didn't have that with Deion Sanders, quite frankly. But this is a game where there is a possibility that Matt Rule gets out-coached, that his team gets out-prepared, outplayed, out-schemed, all of that stuff, because Bielema has turned this Illini team into something serious. And I know Illinois, here and there, every couple of years, they kind of jump out at you as a dangerous team. Maybe it's a good offense. Maybe it's a good defense. This feels like a slightly more well-rounded team than Illinois has had in a couple of seasons. But that takes you back to Nebraska. Man, can they get after the quarterback. And if Dylan Raiola can live up to that 5-star All-American Heisman candidate down the road, future NFL draft, if he could showcase that on Friday night, how do you not like the Huskers? The environment is going to be wild. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, Memorial Stadium is a place that's been champing at the bit to really get another prime matchup here. This is a program that a lot of people who might be watching this, if you're a Gen Z or a millennial, mini millennial like me, I know of like the mid 2000s Nebraska. I don't even know about that 90s Nebraska. That hit.
I'm a little older than you. Unfortunately, I do know something about those 90s Nebraska.
Those 90s Nebraska teams were unbelievable. And I know that the people up there in Lincoln are looking to get back to that those winning ways. And look, they never faltered, really. They still show up and they still show out. I think they've sold out like 450 consecutive games. They have been ready to go for this game. They've been waiting for a ranked versus ranked. And that's the thing. If you're Nebraska, just ride the wave. This is something that they struggled with last year. It's turnovers. If you turn the ball over, you cut yourself off at the knees. And that's something that they really haven't struggled with all that badly this year. At least it hasn't struck them yet, despite the fact that you have a freshman quarterback who's starting for you under center, and this is also a team that this is their first Big Ten action of the season. And they haven't had a winning record in the Big Ten conference going back to 2016. This just feels like a big moment for Matt Rule and Dylan Raiola and everybody else involved in this program. And in Illinois, I mean, they've been in these games so far this season before. They had the win against Kansas. Jalen Daniels, they shut him out. They got after it, and they beat the crap out of that Kansas team, a team that a lot of people expected to be a potential front runner to win a Big 12 championship. And you saw what they did to that team. This is a Nebraska team that you had the one moment against Colorado, but outside of that, it's come on. I mean, that's not a real high level team. This is your first opportunity to see somebody, albeit not necessarily an elite level team. Illinois is a respectable team with a firm identity. They want to run the ball. That's Brett Bielema's specialty. That's what he wants to do. And you're returning like Luke Altmaier at the quarterback position. You have 3 experienced offensive linemen, and they want to get after it. That's what they want to do. And I wonder whose experience wins the day. Is it the role players and everybody else involved in the Nebraska program and with the freshman quarterback, or is it the antithesis of that with the veteran quarterback and the coach who's been there and done that, the team that's been around the front, around there, around the block, so to speak. And the Nebraska front 7 going up against Luke Altmaier, that's also going to be a very interesting contest in this. But I just want to see Memorial Stadium pop off again. It just feels like a place that's ready to boil over. And that's where we're going to see that environment really, really come to a head.
Yeah, there's that thing about college football where certain environments are going to deliver. And the game anticipation itself, sure, but the anticipation for just seeing what the stadium looks like, everyone decked out in red, the whole setup, and certainly Nebraska is going to be looking and feeling that way on Friday night. It is going to be loud.
Sorry, I was having a little issue there with my mute button. We're trying out a new Wi-Fi system, so don't judge me. But no, it's one of those moments that I feel like Memorial Stadium is going to be ready, but I want to know if Dylan Raiola is ready. That's really what it comes down to for me. If he can, if they can ride that wave, if they're ready for that moment, then this should be a fantastic football game. It should be a lot of fun, one way or the other. Another game that really has a lot of implications in the Big Ten. We'll keep it up there. It's USC and it's Michigan. This game not happening on Friday night. This one's going to be on Saturday night, but it's the first of the league's 4 newcomers to play in a Big Ten matchup. And I think it feels appropriate that it's USC playing Michigan. That Oregon is really seen as the front runner of the newcomers, of the teams who can really take that next step and potentially contend for a Big Ten championship. But let's not undersell how important USC was in that whole decision to bring in, to effectively dissolve what we then knew of as the Pac-12. I mean, USC was the centerpiece of that. That they were the crown jewel of the Pac-12 conference, even if it wasn't necessarily showing up on the football field last season. So far this year, USC has delivered on some of that promise. Maybe the defense has taken that next step under Dayton Lynn. Maybe that offense can continue to be as explosive as it was last year. It hasn't really necessarily unlocked that level with Miller Moss under center. But then again, you're replacing a Heisman Trophy candidate or a Heisman Trophy winner and then a candidate last season with Caleb Williams. But I think this feels like a springboard moment for either one of these programs. But I think especially USC, because that would be I don't like all of these grandiose sort of bits of commentary, but it does feel like a grand arrival of sorts for USC if they were to win this game. You're beating the 3-time defending Big Ten champion and the reigning national champion in their house. That feels pretty grand to me. But on the other hand, it's a Michigan program that's in hardcore wounded animal mode, a team that just got absolutely blasted by Texas. And I have another parallel that I'm going to draw in that discussion here when we get back into it. But look, they can't lose this game and salvage their goals for the 2024 season. That's just sort of how it goes. You would be 2-2 to start the season. That's a death note for what they really want to do down the stretch this year outside of just beat Ohio State. They want to win national championships and compete for them. They want to make the college football playoff, and you lose this game, and that's a hammer, or that's a nail in there in that coffin for Michigan. So very important for both of these teams. Abe, what do you think?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I wouldn't declare anything a grand arrival by beating this Michigan team. This is nowhere close to what we've seen in years past. And USC comes in with a couple of advantages, right? The first one being they had an off week last week. Remember, they played early against
Yeah.
LSU, and then they were off last week, so they come into this a little bit more recovered, prepared, et cetera, the game plan and all that stuff. Sharon Moore has made a tragic mistake here, and they are switching quarterbacks, and they are going to go with Alex Orji after Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions in a win over Arkansas State. And Alex Orji came in that game and threw 4 passes. He was 2 of 4 with a touchdown. If you were going to make the quarterback change, you really should have made it in that Arkansas State game earlier, where you could have gotten Orji a number of series to run through this offense. And I know maybe the interceptions kind of played its way into that decision. I think it was pretty apparent week 1 that Davis Warren wasn't going to get the job done. I think it was pretty apparent week 2 that Davis Warren wasn't going to get the job done. I don't know why it had to wait to 3 interceptions against Arkansas State for Sharon Moore to understand that Davis Warren wasn't going to get the job done. I was shocked out of camp that it wasn't Alex Orji. I had been just assuming all offseason that was the plan. He gives you a lot more with his legs, along with what he can do with his arm. But if neither guy's going to be able to complete passes down the field and throw the ball, you may as well give you the ball to the guy who can at least extend the drive with his legs. And that's what Alex Orji is going to look to do. And so I just think it would have been much more beneficial to make this decision earlier than on a short week not short week, but on a 1 week turnaround, preparing to welcome in USC. If nothing else is apparent that this Michigan team is not anywhere close to the teams of years past, it's the fact that they had a quarterback change leading into week 4 of the season. I agree with what you're saying. Man, this would be an important win, because if you do drop this one, if you're Michigan, if you do drop to 2-2, including 2 losses at home, right? That's something that's relatively unheard of over the past, without thinking back year by year, it feels like 25 years. I remember a Michigan team that's through 4 weeks had 2 losses at home, although it could have happened. But yeah, USC is kind of clinging, and that's what's interesting, because I don't think Michigan's in this discussion. USC is going to kind of cling around into that. Can they find their way into the playoffs? Here's the problem. We just talked about Nebraska potentially going 10-2. One of those 2 losses might potentially be USC. The gauntlet is laid for SC. They're really going to have to run the table on their schedule if they're going to find their way in. They can't have any ugly losses. That would include Saturday in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, look, we talked about Michigan being a potential 4-loss team this year, and that's because they play games like this, and just sort of this nature of the beast here. And I kind of want to push back a little bit on your Alex Orji comments. Alex Orji was the front runner to win this job. He just didn't go out and take it. He had every opportunity to win the job. He didn't do it, but it was clear that he just wasn't good enough. That's just what it came down to.
Well, but
on top of that,
I agree, but it's also clear Davis Warren wasn't good enough.
That's what I said. Davis Warren it became clear that he was not the guy for this job. Alex Orji was supposed to be the guy. And I will say this, it's as much an illustration of them being in wounded animal mode that they're dangerous because they're desperate, and desperate animals do desperate things. But look, Alex Orji making that change illustrates that fact. But on top of that, it shows that they have a very firm identity, and they're just leaning into it at this point. They want to run the football. Alex Orji gives you more of a dual threat option. A guy who can legitimately put the ball in, tuck it, and run. Gives you another option out of the backfield. And on the other hand, I think that it does put them at a bit of a disservice because they're not built to come back from deficits. But not that Warren was able to really help them in that regard either. You saw that happen against Texas. Texas takes an early lead in that game, and it felt like it was all but done. And linking that back to this game, I don't necessarily know if Miller Moss and this USC offense, and specifically the this USC defense, are built in that same physical nature that Texas could match their physicality, and that's where it was just a mismatch because Michigan can't play bully ball, and if Michigan can't play bully ball against you, then they're not going to win. That's just really what it came down to. That's just sort of every edition of Michigan over the last couple of years, and it's just most teams can't match that physicality. But Texas took a lead, and Michigan's not built to come back. However, if USC does something similar, I think they have a path or an avenue to winning this game, especially because I feel like the fans are going to start get panic and do everything else. Oh my God, it's happening again. We're down 14-0. What are we going to do? But on the other side, if Michigan can force a Miller Moss to misdirection or some sort of mistake of some kind, maybe there's an interception early in this game, or maybe you have a random tip pass that happens that, like you're in a road contest, you're playing in the big house for the first time. That's a pretty intimidating place to play. How do you react if things don't go your way early? Well, Michigan can get on the ball and they can build a lead themselves, and then they could just grind out the clock. And if Michigan can start grinding, they have an opportunity to win this game because USC's run defense was dreadful last year. It looks like it's improved, but their only real test this year was LSU. LSU, we've now seen, doesn't really have a strong rushing attack. It just was one of the reasons why they almost lost to to the other USC, to South Carolina. But I have some question marks about that LSU rushing attack, and that's really the only real example that we've seen from USC this season about having a rush defense. This is really the big test. Can the Michigan rushing attack find success early and early enough that they can really punish USC? I want to see it happen. I'm fascinated with that matchup. But on the other hand, if USC can jump out to that lead, maybe you can take Michigan out of it because Michigan's going to run the ball, whether they're up or they're down or whatever. They have to run the ball because that's the only way they're going to move. And that's it. So I think that makes for a very interesting and compelling matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to keep pointing to this, Garrett, and it kind of goes in line with what you've just said. But Donovan Edwards was on the cover of EA Sports College Football 2025. He's just been a guy, just a guy, and that's just not good enough for him. He needs to be one of the preeminent running backs, and through 3 weeks, he has not been. He needs to break out. He needs to do it in this game if they're going to have a chance.
That's really what it comes down to. I think this should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited for that one. The Big Ten's got some great matchups, but also Big 12 matchup here. Utes are hopeful that Cam Rising can play in this one after he sat out last week against Utah State. They didn't need him necessarily to go out and get the win in that one, but a finger injury on his throwing hand is going to be something that's going to weigh over this game, and it's going to be kind of an honest thing because what is Utah without Cam Rising? They've shown all last season that they're just not quite that same level of team as they are when he's not there. But on conversely, Alan Bowman, formerly of Texas Tech and Michigan, is the starter for the Cowboys. And look, I think the average age in this game at the quarterback position is 25 years old. Damn. I mean, they're young professionals at this point, and they're going to be lining up under center. And I think somebody called this what did I say what it was? It was the Pirates of the pirate or whatever versus the ship captain, their admiral that's like sent to go get him or something. Is because you have Bowman has that weird mustache, and then Cam Rising looks like a pirate, I guess. I don't know.
Someone's trying too hard. We should move.
Someone's trying a little too hard with it, but
move on.
I can't unsee it, and now like that's it. It's a funny thing just with these older guys under center, but I don't want that to kind of take away from the fact that these are the two front runners in the Big 12 conference. And I think that this is just a fun game in that instance, just because there are the implications for this game are massive. Who takes that first step? Utah, it's their first opportunity in the Big 12 to assert themselves. Oklahoma State, you're the reigning runner-up, I guess. The Big 12 champion's not there anymore, but Oklahoma State, can you establish your rushing attack? Utah has a dominant rush defense. They have under Whittingham and basically the entire time he's been there. The Ollie Gordon matchup there is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, we just talked about Michigan and Donovan Edwards and how he hasn't really gotten it going. It's been an even worse look for Ollie Gordon, a guy who entered the season as maybe Heisman hopeful type of. You were looking at, can this guy come close to 2,000 yards and this and that, and he's had an absolutely dreadful start to the season. And Oklahoma State is not going to win this game if two things happen. If Cam Rising isn't diminished by the injury, right? If we get the full Cam Rising experience, if he's 100%, he can make all the throws. He can move on the run. He has no problem handling snaps under center, snaps from pistol, shotgun, whatever. If Cam Rising is Cam Rising, but the other aspect of that is they're going to need Ollie Gordon. They've gotten to this point in the season with Alan Bowman fighting a good fight, and they're averaging nearly 43 points a game, and that's all good. But we know about the defense that Utah has had in recent years and has again this year. They're going to need to be a lot better in this one. And both teams are probably going to look to run the ball. Utah's had some success running the ball this season too. A lot of that because the injuries to Cam Rising and some concern there. But it's going to be really interesting to see just how close to 100% Cam Rising is. I think that's certainly an important mark for Utah. And then again, all respect to Alan Bowman, but if they can't get Ollie Gordon at some point, maybe they can find a way to win this game. But if they can't get him going at some point this season, it's just tough to imagine them being able to win the Big 12 conference without him. This would be the first step for him to really reemerge as one of the top backs in college football and showcase what they can do on the ground and help that team win.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an experienced Oklahoma State squad. I think they're a little deeper than just Ollie Gordon. He's the poster child of what success looks like for this team this year, but I don't want to let that distract from the fact that you have 21 of 22 starters who've returned for this Oklahoma State team. That's really good, last I checked, but Cam Rising is the X factor for me. He has to be. He's a guy who, if he doesn't show up and play at a high level, then we've seen Utah rise and fall without him. It rise with him and fall without him. And Kyle Whittingham, Whittingham versus Mike Gundy, I feel like is such an underrated matchup here too. These are two of the most experienced head coaches in the Big 12 conference, two of the most experienced head coaches in all of college football at this point. And I mean, they have damn near identical records too over the last 20 plus years of coaching at their institutions. I'm fascinated for that one. It's 4:00 right there in the middle window. So they're going to have plenty of eyeballs on them because they're in between a lot of like the big noon kickoff coming in with USC and Michigan, and then it's Tennessee and Oklahoma in the nightcap. So they're going to have a lot of attention here in that middle window there. But I think it's interesting and compelling on multiple levels because you have so much experience across the field. I don't think that these are two teams that are going to beat themselves. I think this is going to be some good, attractive football. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way because you know what? That's college football in a nutshell. But I think the recipe for either team comes down to who are your two best players. It's Ollie Gordon running the ball, and it's Cam Rising dominating on the other side. That's really where it comes down to, and I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I might have PTSD. I know you said these two teams aren't going to beat themselves. I've seen Alan Bowman beat himself too often. I don't have trust in that guy. And okay. So if you put it on his shoulders, I have concerns about how far Oklahoma State can go. That's why I feel Ollie Gordon needs to step up, or they need Cam Rising to be less than 100%. I just do not, and will never, which is my fault, not his, will never trust and have faith and confidence in Alan Bowman.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the nightcap here. It's Tennessee at Oklahoma. Compelling for several different reasons. Tennessee is on fire. The Vols have already outscored their opponents 191-13 through just 3 games. And this is their first true road game. But they've been about as good as any team in America. And it's also Oklahoma making their SEC debut. And the Sooners are kind of finding their way still with Jackson Arnold under center. He's a first-year starter for them. And they're going to be hoping that things come together pretty quickly because he's also leading them in rushing. And not in a good way. Like, that's not good. It means that nobody else is getting off and finding success in the rushing attack. That's what that means. They don't want to run Jackson Arnold. That's not their goal in this. It means that the offensive line isn't holding up in the way that it should. And on top of that, he's having to scramble out and make plays with it by himself. And that is not a recipe for success if the Oklahoma Sooners. But on top of this, I also want to shout this out as well. Josh Heupel is making his return to Norman. And I think he's going to be out for blood. This is a guy who got run out of town after he won a Heisman Trophy there in the early 2000s. He was the offensive coordinator there. He got run out. And he was scapegoated for some of the issues that Oklahoma had in the early 2010s. And I don't necessarily blame him for it, but he goes off and finds some more success elsewhere. And now he's bringing back the hottest team in college football with the Tennessee Volunteers. It's a different UT than Oklahoma's used to, but that doesn't mean it's going to be as much or more of a test than the Longhorns could be later on in the season. And I mean that in every sense of the word, because Nico Iamaleava is that guy. But like I said, it's just that first true road environment, and that's going to play in to any further discussion that we have on this game.
Look, Tennessee was very impressive in their throttling of NC State, and then they put 65 up by halftime of the very next week. And so it's about time we find out how much of that was real and how much of that is we don't really buy NC State. I don't care if there was a number next to their name or not. And it's push comes to shove time, as you mentioned. If Tennessee wants to join the ranks of college football championship contenders, not just guys that can get into the playoffs, but teams that can get into the playoffs and potentially win this thing, they need to go into that road environment and handle business. And speaking of that road environment, I think it is an important factor for Oklahoma and Boomer Sooner to have a impact on this game. These fans have got to rattle as best they can a freshman quarterback on the road. I think we saw a couple of years ago when a top-ranked Tennessee team came into Sanford Stadium, came into Athens, and in the environment there, how much it impacted Tennessee. Here's the thing. So did the team, right? Like a lot of that was the environment and the fans. It was also about the Georgia defensive line and Georgia secondary just absolutely putting the handcuffs on anything Tennessee was trying to do offensively. It was 21-6, the end of the first quarter, whatever it was, and the game was over effectively. That was before the rain came. But I think Oklahoma needs to have an impact from their fans. They have got to make it loud. They have got to make communication difficult. They've got to make it, and they probably have been working on silent snaps and all that. I mean, they have got to impact this game and keep their own players energized and amped up as well. The adrenaline has to be coursing through the veins because of the environment the fans are providing. Because I don't know yet what really we can expect from Oklahoma. Maybe they're better than I'd given them credit for. It was a one-possession game late last week against Tulane, and they got a pick six and then a couple sacks, and they handled business. But it was like 21-16 midway through the fourth quarter. Tulane can't come back a little bit on Oklahoma, and that's an okay Tulane team, but Oklahoma hasn't quite sold me yet. If we're going to have that discussion of can they make their way into the playoffs, they haven't quite sold me yet, and Tennessee has. And so I'm really interested to see how they hold up, how they match up. And I agree with you about the Heupel factor. Now, he's got to get to the point where it's about rubbing it in later down the line in this game. You can't be worrying about that in the first quarter. The touchdowns still count for 6 points there. But yeah, later in the game, if you have a chance to maybe instead of taking a field goal, go for a touchdown, stuff like that, you might see that. I agree with you. There's no doubt about that. But you got to handle business, and it's a big moment for Nico. And quite frankly, the Heisman race is wide open, Garrett. It really is wide open. And this is an opportunity and I know Nico's name's kind of floating around out there in that discussion. This is the opportunity for him on national television to really break out. I know he's kind of broken out when he'd been impressed and all that. This is an opportunity to really break out.
Yeah, in a big way. And like, look, if you're Nico, I mean, you got a good opportunity. And opportunities, you know what they say, they go both ways. And you have a big opportunity to really impress in a big way. But on the other hand, you could have your freshman moment here in this in this situation. I mean, you don't know what he's going to do if things don't work out. And that's why, and that's, it gets me into one of my biggest points for this game, Abe. It's Dylan Sampson the running back. I've said this for years. I said this back when before they went to Sanford Stadium. It's why I gave Georgia the edge in that game, and I picked Georgia to win that game too, in the way that they did. It's because Georgia could stop the run. Oklahoma could stop the run pretty well. And the way you beat Tennessee in a Josh Heupel offense is you knock them off the schedule, and you do it without having to send extra blitzers. If the moment you start having to send extra bodies to slow down that rushing attack is the moment that's when they open up the passing attack and they beat the crap out of you. That's what happens. That is a Josh Heupel offense. And that's why Dylan Sampson's so important, because you do have a true freshman quarterback. Well, not true freshman, a redshirt freshman under center. You don't know what he's going to be in this sort of situation. So you need to take some of that pressure off of him. Don't force him to win this game with his arm. If you're Oklahoma, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't with that, because you know how talented he is with his arm, but you haven't seen him do it. I mean, he doesn't really have to. And don't forget that NC State game. We know what the final score was, but it was still a football game at halftime. That was 10-3. And that was in a neutral site where Tennessee fans had just as many people as NC State did.
How much of that do you think was maybe just Heupel being careful with Nico in his first big game and then kind of unleashing him? I know it's tough to quantify.
It's game flow. It's impossible to quantify for us. I mean, we don't know. I mean, we're not in that sort of situation. I can't think that we can actually legitimately answer it. But to that point, that was a street fight early, and then Tennessee came out and just sort of unloaded on NC State. But I want to see what Tennessee can do if they're in a street fight for a full 4 quarters. We saw them do that on occasion against South Carolina that year, 2 years ago. We saw them do it against Missouri last year. They weren't built to win those types of games, those hyper physical games where they punch you in the mouth and then they stand up and they do it again. Tennessee generally in the Josh Heupel era, they've been fun when their offense works for them and they're staying in rhythm and everything's churning and working. But when things go against them, we've seen Tennessee sort of fall by the wayside. Now, I don't think they've had a talented quarterback who is as talented as the guy that they have right now under center. But I got to see it, and I don't necessarily think that Oklahoma is that team to get this done. But Oklahoma does have the tools to do it. They can affect the quarterback. They have a very potent pass rush. If you can knock off Dylan Sampson in the rush defense, and if you can hold him in check there, you can pin your ears back and get after the quarterback on 3rd and long. You can use that crowd to your advantage, and you control the ball when you're on offense. I need to see more from Jackson Arnold. He needs to step up and have a really big game. I need to see Oklahoma, get after this Tennessee secondary, which we haven't seen a team do that yet this year. Maybe it's because Tennessee's taken a big step forward in that regard. But on the same note, it may just be because Grayson McCall is not built to do that. And that's really the only moment that they've had to really get tested was against NC State. And NC State clearly was not ready for that challenge. And I think it makes for a compelling matchup just between these two teams. I think we have a lot of strength versus strength types of matchups here in this week 4. Lots of fun football. It gets me really jazzed up.
This one, to me, is the one. And I know we talked about the environment in Nebraska. If Oklahoma's going to have a chance, the environment needs to rival that. And look, there's no reason they wouldn't be ramped up, right? It's a night game as well, so they'll have plenty of time to get nice and salty for this one. But this is going to be a fun one. Man, what a tough welcome into the SEC for Oklahoma. Like you couldn't have hosted Vanderbilt or Mississippi State as a warm up. I mean, my goodness. But hey, that's what the SEC is all about. You're gonna have to face them at some point.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. But big opportunity for Nico. Really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a welcoming party for either Jackson Arnold or Nico Iamaleava.
Let me say one more thing about Jackson Arnold, just because not that he reminds me of Dylan Gabriel. I think his performance has to remind you of Dylan Gabriel. You remember that Texas game a year ago? Dylan Gabriel was just absolutely do everything for Oklahoma. And his legs was a real factor in that game. I think, and I know you don't necessarily want to rely on him running the ball, but man, he's got to be able to have that sort of playmaking ability that Dylan Gabriel had a year ago.
Yeah, I think I have a hard time getting a feel in this game, but ultimately I think the Tennessee, if they're able to handle this road environment, they should win this
The
game.
thing
I
is,
don't think
I want to buy in on Tennessee. I
I
really do.
do.
Like in a big way, buy in on Tennessee.
Mhm.
And if I'm gonna do that, that means that they handle business in this game somewhat comfortably. And I'm just not there yet. I'm not there
It's not going
just
to be
yet.
comfortable. I don't think this is going to be a comfortable win for Tennessee. I think they win this game. I don't think it's comfortable. I think
Yeah,
they get put into a bad spot. I think, and that's ultimately good. I think
I
for
don't.
this team.
I don't. I'm not sure I buy Oklahoma yet.
I have big questions
Yeah.
ultimately about Oklahoma. Their consistency is seemingly lacking. And look, you're just a couple of plays away from losing that game
And they
to
almost lost to
Tulane.
Houston 2 weeks
Houston, they
ago. I
really
mean, there's
struggled with. This is a different beast. And look, and if you're Tennessee, do you know how you take out the crowd noise? You punch them in the
yeah.
face early and you don't
Go
let
up
up.
14-3
You go up
by the
14
end of the first
nothing.
quarter. Yeah.
That's it. And that's the way to do it. They did that on occasion against lesser opponents, but they didn't do that against NC State. That was really their only true litmus test that they've had in the first half that they didn't really find a lot of success. It took them a minute to kind of warm up and kind of get into groove. You saw what happened in the second half. They tore them to pieces, but let's see if they can get there. And I think this is a different type of test. And I think it just makes for a very interesting matchup here. But last one we'll get to before we're jumping into our shout outs for week 4. Before we start really digging into the Georgia Tech at Louisville matchup, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow along. We really appreciate all of you for jumping in. However, you are joining this podcast, whether you're listening in live, whether you're listening into a recording or whatever, we appreciate you coming. Make sure to stick around for the remainder of the show, but also like and subscribe and follow along all season long. We really appreciate all of that support. But let's get into the last one that we're going to jump into for today. Georgia Tech at number 19, Louisville. And this Louisville team, I mean, this is a rematch from a game that happened last year. Ironically, this is the first time that these two have played on a Saturday. They played, I think, 3 times now, and never on a Saturday. Very strange. Always seemed to happen. It always happened on a Friday. Just like last year, it happened in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The Aflac kickoff game on Friday night. This was a wild game. Georgia Tech went up big, and then Louisville scored 26 points in the second half, unanswered, and they won this game. I think it was 39-34 or something like that. But this is a Georgia Tech team that got beat in the face against Syracuse, and they're looking to make sure that that doesn't happen for a second time in ACC competition. That win against Florida State isn't quite as sexy as it was in week 0, but this Georgia Tech team is still really bought in. This Louisville team, on the other hand, I mean, they ranked 3rd in scoring offense in the entire country, but those 2 games were against Austin Peay and Jacksonville State. I have big old questions about what this Louisville offense with lots of new faces. You have a new quarterback under center. You have a new running back who's on this team. You have new members of this defense who are here. Georgia Tech has a strong identity. This is a team that's not going to get pushed around. They have a very physical front 5. That offensive line has yet to allow a single sack this season. There's a Louisville team that's averaging 4.5 sacks per game. Again, against an Austin Peay and a Jacksonville State who are having to rally and try to drop back and score. They're trying to throw the ball. This is a Georgia Tech team that's going to want to run the ball as best they can. And then Haynes King has some serious mobility, and he can beat you with his legs too. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC. He's got 2 fantastic options on the outside with Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton. Both of those guys can beat you on any play. They'll move them around all over the field. This Louisville team, I think, has some compelling components to it, just untested components. We haven't really seen them at full gear. They already had a bye week this year. They've only played 2 games. It's not a very large sample size for Louisville, but they're the number 19 team in the country for some reason. It's because they have some success on offense, and Jeff Brom, he knows how to run an offense. But should be, high scoring potentially. Some people say it's going to be a low scoring game, but it's going to be Georgia Tech and Louisville on a Saturday for the first time.
Yeah, we know about Georgia Tech on the road against ranked opponents in the ACC, so we'll see if they can
4-0.
continue. Yeah, we'll see if they can continue that trend. The question for me is in regards to Louisville is kind of as you referenced in regards to Tennessee. Like, what happens if they find themselves in one of those tight 4-quarter games? It's been so easy for them this season due to the inferior competition. What happens if it's not easy? And Georgia Tech has played a couple of teams that do have a little bit of resistance. And of course, they lost one of those. But that was showcasing some concerns in the secondary. If Louisville's going to try and run to beat Georgia Tech, that could cause issues. Right now, if you're going to beat Georgia Tech, I would recommend throwing the ball on them. That's something Florida State was unable to do. They lost that game. It was something Syracuse was able to do, and the Orange won that game. And so interested to see what Louisville's game plan is in this one, because the way I look at it, and I know they blew out Austin Peay and Jacksonville State, as you mentioned, but you got to have to throw the ball in this one. And if Georgia Tech can handle Ja'Cory Brooks, if they can limit him, I don't know who else is going to step up and beat you on that receiving core. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can. I mean, you almost wish, just like basketball, you play like a box and one type of. I mean, just double team, slide safeties to Ja'Cory Brooks, make someone else beat you, and we'll see if Louisville can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Georgia Tech identity to play physical games, and they may have had too many miscues against Syracuse. They had too many things go against them, and the biggest thing for them ultimately in that game was you had Haynes King leading you in rushing, and that's not a recipe for success for Georgia Tech. You need to build in that rushing attack, and it comes back to really their, I don't want to say inability to find a second running back, a bigger, more physical back. You have Jamal Haynes back there right now. He's a great player. He's a really good player, but he's not the type of player that you want running between the tackles. He's a little smaller. He's just a smaller body, and they have some guys who they're trying to fit into those roles, younger guys, but they just haven't had anybody fully click yet. It's supposed to be Trey Cooley, ironically a Louisville transfer, but he hasn't really. Well, he's been injured, really, and then last season he wasn't able to really take over that role and make it his. But I think ultimately, if Georgia Tech can win the physicality battle, that is the recipe for success here. But Haynes King, you know who he's going to be. He's going to be a strong, consistent, dynamic threat who can do it with his arm and do it with his legs. He's got guys to get it done. And I think Louisville being a double-digit favorite in this game really feels strange to me. I think that Georgia Tech will keep this close. They're going to want to run the ball. They're going to control the clock as best they can. I don't trust Louisville. I just don't. And I think they're a good football team. I think they're a consistent football team. But even last year when they made their first run to an ACC championship game, they were woefully inconsistent. They had long periods of time.
They also relied on the big play last year way too much.
Yeah. Jamari Thrash is not there anymore. Like you lose Jawar Jordan, you lose Jamari Thrash, you lose Jack Plummer. Like you lose those guys who were sort of that steadfast person on that team, like the people on that team who could be trusted to go out and make explosive plays. They're not there anymore. And you have a group of players who are trying to solidify that role, but I haven't seen them do it yet. They did it against Austin Peay and Jacksonville State. Great. I don't buy it. 10.5+ point favorites. I think that's a lot of Vegas looking at a number and then people potentially overreacting to what happened against Syracuse. It was a Georgia Tech team who couldn't run the ball as effectively as they want to. I don't expect that to happen again in this matchup against Louisville.
Yeah, I mentioned it at the very start. We're starting to get a sample size on some of these teams, maybe starting to get a feel, and now it's prove it games and stuff like that. There's just no sample size on Louisville with the two opponents they face. It's just impossible to know what they're really about. And we'll find out on Saturday, but predictions for what they can be are fruitless right now because you just haven't seen it against anyone that can put up a real fight.
Yeah, and we're at that point in the season where the litmus tests are starting to come. And this is really a big litmus test for Louisville. Not as much for Georgia Tech. I think we have an idea of who they're going to be this year. Mm-hmm. They're one of the few teams in college football who've played several top opponents already this season. You have a Syracuse team that's really good, a Florida State team who was a top 10 opponent at the time. Now it's a number 19 team.
Even Georgia State's not a total pushover.
Georgia State just got a big win against Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was Bruce Feldman had them in the top 45 of the teams top teams in America. Georgia Tech's had a tough road to start the season.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I think Brent Key kind of likes that because he gets an idea of who his football team is and where they can grow. That's just kind of a coach Brent Key type of thing that he would definitely like. But hey, let's move into our week 4 shout outs. I'm going to go first just because it kind of ties into this game. And I want to give a shout out to 92.9. So we both work at 92.9 The Game here in Atlanta. And a guy who used to work with us and now he's up on ESPN. He's getting his number honored, I think is the word that they've been using, effectively is being retired up there by the Louisville Cardinals. Harry Douglas, awesome dude, fantastic person. I had the pleasure of working with him on several different occasions. We've had him in as a guest. I mean, we're going to have him in on the show tomorrow on Friday. So we're going to have a lot of fun with Harry. He's an awesome dude. Love Harry. Big shout out to him. His number's going to be retired by Louisville. He played for the Falcons, played for the Titans in the NFL, but that was after a very strong career up there in Louisville. So I wanted to give him a big old shout out.
I think I'm going to give my shout out, and I know this might be weird, but it's just been super enjoyable this week. Shout out to Cal Twitter.
Oh, like, so true. Holy crap.
Like, shout out to Cal Twitter, man. Like, it's just been fun.
if you were watching this and you have not seen all the Cal Twitter stuff, it is so damn funny. It is so damn funny. And it started, I think, after they had the upset win against Auburn, and somebody called them like the woke whatever. And then they just sort of rolled with it. And since then, it's been all artificial intelligence, AI generated images of Florida State. Now they're taking over Florida State, and you have like the players bowing or something. It's just so funny. It's ridiculous, but it's just Twitter personified.
Yeah. So shout out to them. And then just like a little aside real quick. John Gruden this week said that he'd like to return to coaching. He wants to be a collegiate coach. Just Godspeed to whatever program decides that's a good idea. I'm desperately praying it's not the Florida Gators, my Florida Gators, who make that mistake. If anyone does, Godspeed. But like, just a reminder, just because someone says something doesn't mean anyone has to like follow through on it. Like, I could come out here and say like, I'd like a date with Sydney Sweeney. If she chooses not to recognize that, did it really happen? So like, on behalf of
it happened. It still happened.
Behalf of all college football, like, just pretend Gruden never said anything, and then we can all go about our business. So that's that.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm hoping that you do get that date with Sydney Sweeney. I think that'd be wonderful for you, and an absolute coup. You know, that's an absolute takeover, man. Good for you.
I will not be holding my breath.
I wouldn't either. All right, folks. Well, it's been a lot of fun. We've talked about Abe Gordon getting dates with Sydney Sweeney. We've had a woke takeover of Twitter, and we've had lots of college football fun, and that's pretty much it. College Football Overtime Podcast. That's what we do. And we have a lot of fun. Well, so like, subscribe, follow along all season long. We do this twice a week. Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. We will see you again very soon. We got a lot of reactions, tons of great games, and we'll do that all right here. So we'll see you again after this weekend. Have fun this Saturday. Enjoy the games. We'll see you very soon.